There I was, 68 years old, enjoying my retirement in the home I'd lived in for over 2 decades, when a certified letter changed everything. Inside that envelope was a lien notice from our HOA, threatening to take away the one thing I'd worked my entire life to own. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that's overstepped its bounds, make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and share your own HOA horror stories in the comments below. Together, we can expose these abuses and help others fight back. I moved into Willow Creek Lakes back in 1998, right after my wife Martha and I retired. It was supposed to be our little slice of heaven. A quiet community with a beautiful man-made lake, well-maintained properties, and neighbors who looked out for one another. Back then, the HOA was just a formality, mostly making sure the lawns were mowed and the community pool stayed clean. Martha passed 5 years ago, and this house became my connection to her, to our life together. Every morning I'd sit on the porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise over the lake, just like we used to do together. The house wasn't just a building to me, it was a memory palace. About 3 years ago, things started changing in Willow Creek. New people moved in, younger families with more money and different ideas about what our community should be. The HOA board slowly transformed from a group of neighbors keeping things nice to what I can only describe as a miniature dictatorship led by a woman I'll call Mrs. Harrington. Mrs. Harrington was maybe 50, always dressed like she was heading to a business meeting, and she ran those HOA meetings like a military operation. She had a little group of followers who nodded along with everything she said, and together they started implementing all sorts of new rules and regulations. First came the strict guidelines about lawn ornaments. No more of the little garden gnomes Martha had collected over the years. Then came the restrictions on parking, followed by the mandate that all houses must be repainted in one of 4 approved colors within 2 years. The fines for violations started at $50, but quickly escalated to hundreds for repeat offenses. My first real run-in with them was about my shed. I'd built it myself back in 2002 with Martha's help. It was a simple wooden structure where I kept my gardening tools and lawnmower. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional, and it held a lot of memories. Last spring, I received a notice that my shed was non-compliant with the new architectural guidelines. According to the letter, it was too tall, too close to the property line, and didn't match the aesthetic vision for the community. I was given 30 days to either modify it to meet their new standards or remove it entirely. I tried to reason with them. I went to an HOA meeting and explained that the shed had been there for nearly 20 years without issue. I pointed out that I was a retiree on a fixed income and couldn't afford to rebuild it. Mrs. Harrington listened to my plea with a tight smile and said, "Mr. Henderson, rules are rules. The community has voted on these new standards, and everyone must comply. We can offer you a payment plan for the fines if that helps." I left that meeting frustrated but determined to find a solution. I hired a local contractor to evaluate the shed and tell me what modifications would be needed to bring it into compliance. His estimate was nearly $5,000, money I simply didn't have. I decided to appeal to the board again, this time with a letter explaining my financial situation and the historical significance of the shed to me. I included pictures of Martha and me building it together, hoping to appeal to their human side. 2 weeks later, I received a response. They would grant me a 6-month extension to bring the shed into compliance, but the fines would continue. to accumulate at $100 per month until the issue was resolved. This was my first taste of what was to come, the false hope. I thought they were being reasonable, giving me time to figure out a solution. What I didn't realize was that they were just setting me up for a bigger fall. During those 6 months, I did everything I could to save money. I canceled my cable subscription, stopped eating out, even put off some minor medical procedures to save on costs. I managed to put away about $2,000, which wasn't enough for the full renovation, but might be enough to make the necessary modifications to satisfy the HOA. A week before my extension was set to expire, I called the HOA office to schedule a final inspection. That's when they dropped the bombshell on me. "Mr. Henderson," the office manager told me, "the board has revised the architectural guidelines again. Your shed now needs to be completely rebuilt with specific materials and moved to a different location on your property to be in compliance." I was floored. "But that's not what we agreed to," I protested. "You gave me an extension based on the previous requirements." "The board has the right to update the community standards at any time," she replied coolly. "The new guidelines were approved last month and posted on the community website. It's your responsibility to stay informed." I was speechless. Not only was the renovation I had planned no longer sufficient, but the new requirements would cost even more, probably close to $8,000 with the materials and labor they were now demanding. I requested another meeting with the board, but this time they refused, citing continued non-compliance as the reason. Instead, they sent me a notice that I had 30 days to remove the shed entirely or face legal action. At this point, I was beyond frustrated. I reached out to some of my neighbors, many of whom had been in Willow Creek as long as I had. To my surprise, several of them were dealing with similar issues: fines for minor violations, sudden changes to long-standing rules, and threats of legal action. We decided to form a sort of resistance group, meeting at each other's homes to discuss strategy. There were about a dozen of us, all retirees who had been in the community for 15-plus years. We pooled our resources and hired a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. Our lawyer, a sharp young man named David Chen, reviewed our cases and the HOA's bylaws. He discovered something interesting. The HOA had been making changes to the community rules without following the proper procedures outlined in their own governing documents. According to the bylaws, any changes to the architectural guidelines required a vote by the entire community, not just the board. But Mrs. Harrington and her crew had been implementing changes based solely on board votes, never putting them to the community as a whole. Armed with this information, we sent a formal letter to the HOA board demanding that they rescind all the new rules implemented in the past 2 years and refund all the fines collected under those rules. Their response was swift and brutal. Instead of addressing our concerns, they slapped a lien on my property for $12,500. The accumulated fines for my shed violation, plus legal fees they claimed to have incurred. You wouldn't believe what they did next. They sent copies of the notice to all my neighbors, trying to intimidate me and discourage others from joining our cause. The letter implied that I was a delinquent homeowner who was dragging down property values in the community. If this HOA sounds unbelievable already, make sure to hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how this ends. The lien was a serious threat. If not resolved, it could eventually lead to a forced sale of my home. the home Martha and I had shared, the home where I had planned to live out my days. This wasn't just about a shed anymore. It was about protecting my home and my financial security. Our lawyer advised us to file a lawsuit against the HOA, seeking to have the lien removed and the board's actions declared invalid. It was a daunting prospect. Taking on the HOA in court would be expensive and time-consuming, with no guarantee of success, but we were determined. The 12 of us agreed to split the legal costs, and David agreed to represent us for a reduced fee, with the understanding that if we won, the HOA would be responsible for our legal bills. The months leading up to the court date were tense. The HOA continued to harass us with daily inspections, finding new violations and issuing more fines. They even tried to have my water shut off by claiming I had unauthorized modifications to my plumbing. I have to admit, there were times when I considered just giving in. The stress was taking a toll on my health, and I worried that at my age I might not live to see the end of this fight. But every time I thought about backing down, I would look at that shed Martha and I had built together, and I knew I had to see this through. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. Our group of 12, all dressed in our best clothes, arrived at the courthouse early. The HOA board was there too, including Mrs. Harrington, who looked confident and smug in her expensive suit. The judge, a woman in her late 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened patiently as both sides presented their case. The HOA's lawyer painted me as a stubborn homeowner who refused to follow community rules, putting my own interests above those of his neighbors. When it was our turn, David presented the evidence clearly and methodically. He showed how the HOA had violated its own bylaws by implementing changes without community approval. He produced meeting minutes where Mrs. Harrington had explicitly stated that getting community approval would be too time-consuming, and that it was better to ask for forgiveness than permission. He then presented evidence of the harassment our group had faced, the excessive fines, the sudden rule changes, the attempts to intimidate us. He argued that the HOA had overstepped its authority and was now abusing its power to punish homeowners who dared to question their authority. The turning point came when David called Mrs. Harrington to the stand. Under oath, she admitted that the board had never sought community approval for the new rules, claiming it was implied because homeowners hadn't objected. She also admitted that the board had targeted specific homeowners, including me, for making trouble. When the HOA's lawyer tried to object, the judge silenced him with a sharp look. "It seems to me," she said, "that this homeowners association has forgotten who it works for. The board is supposed to represent the interests of the homeowners, not rule over them like tyrants." The courtroom was silent as the judge continued. "The evidence clearly shows that the HOA board has violated its own bylaws, harassed homeowners, and abused its power. The lien placed on Mr. Henderson's property is not only unjustified, but illegal." And then came the moment that shocked everyone in that courtroom, especially the HOA board. "Not only am I ordering the lien removed immediately," the judge announced, "but I'm also ordering the HOA to refund all fines collected under the improperly implemented rules over the past 2 years. Furthermore, I'm ordering the current board to step down immediately and for new elections to be held under the supervision of a court-appointed monitor." Mrs. Harrington's face went pale. "Your Honor, you can't," she started to say. "I can and I have," the judge interrupted. "This association has been operating outside the law for too long. It's time for a change. The HOA's lawyer tried to argue, but the judge wasn't having it. She banged her gavel and declared the case closed. As we walked out of the courtroom, our group was elated. We had won not just for ourselves, but for the entire community. The HOA board looked defeated, their power stripped away by the very legal system they had tried to use against us. In the weeks that followed, the changes in Willow Creek were remarkable. With new leadership, the HOA returned to its original purpose, maintaining the community's beauty and functionality without overstepping its bounds. The new board even held a community meeting to apologize for the previous board's actions and to ask for input on reasonable rules that would benefit everyone. As for me, I got to keep my shed exactly as it was. In fact, several neighbors stopped by to tell me how much they liked it and how it reminded them of the old days in Willow Creek. Looking back on this experience, I've learned some valuable lessons. First, never underestimate the power of standing together with your neighbors. A single voice might be ignored, but a chorus of voices cannot be silenced. Second, knowledge is power. Understanding the bylaws and your rights as a homeowner is crucial when dealing with an overreaching HOA. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, no matter your age or circumstances. Martha always used to say that the only thing necessary for the triumph of bad people is for good people to do nothing. I'm glad I didn't do nothing. If you're dealing with a difficult HOA, know that you have rights and options. Don't let them intimidate you or make you feel powerless. Stand up for yourself, gather support, and don't be afraid to seek legal help if necessary. And remember, your home is your castle, whether it's a modest lakeside property like mine or something grander. No one has the right to take that away from you without a fight. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've had similar experiences with HOAs, please share them in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up to injustice, no matter where you find it.